I unfortunately had to move back with my family after my most recent breakup. He and I were living in Boston together in an apartment we got. Just a little word of advice. Never sign a lease with someone you recently got into a relationship with. He was not the person I thought he was. My parents lived in Western Massachusetts. If you've ever been to Massachusetts, you'd know the more west you get, typically, the more rural it gets. I'm not a big country girl. I like to be in or near a major city, especially since I'm in my 20s. My parents' area is super boring. I'm hoping I'm only here temporarily until I find another apartment I can afford myself, though I'll be staying away from Boston for reasons. I had to get a job back at the urgent care facility I used to work at before I moved. They welcomed me back excitedly, even if it is just temporarily until I move again. The trade-off with this job, though, is that I tend to work undesirable hours, meaning overnights. Though the shifts are easy, they're boring and entirely mess up my sleep schedule and social life. Not that social life is even the best around here. After my shifts, sometimes I'll stop for what's considered my dinner, usually takeout since not much is open at these hours. This morning, I got out at 4:00 a.m. and there's a bagel place that opens at that time. They serve a lot of types of food, so I stopped by there and grabbed a chicken sandwich and a salad. I was going to eat it once I got home. I also had to make a pit stop for gas as well. I stopped at the local Shell station, one of the few gas stations open at this hour, that was on the way home. The parking lot for this station is huge, and yet I hardly ever see any other cars there, even during the day. I went inside to pay cash to save a little money. When I went back outside to the pump, there was now another car at one of the other pumps. Was a blue 7. A guy got out of the car as I was walking over to the pump I was at. As I began fueling, I noticed him start to fuel up as well. I guess he locked the handle in place so it would automatically keep dispensing gas without him holding it, because he walked through the two pumps to my side and then said to me, "Want to see a funny trick?" I immediately hated this interaction. Still, for some reason I said, "What's the trick?" He then started doing that stupid old trick where you pretend you're pulling your finger off with your other hand by just folding it down. He kept looking down at his hands and then back at me with this kind of sarcastic looking expression, as if he knew what he was doing was stupid. Honestly, I couldn't tell. I fake laughed so that he'd go away, but he didn't stop. He kept doing the trick even after I looked away and tried my best to pretend not to notice anymore. When I felt the click of the gas nozzle indicating that the tank was full, I was so relieved. I quickly latched the nozzle to the pump and hurried inside for my change. When I came back outside, the man wasn't in sight anymore, yet his car was still there, and the hose was still pumping gas into his car. I didn't want to stick around to catch his attention again. I got back in my car, though, just out of paranoia. I checked the back seats to make sure he wasn't hiding back there. I locked the doors and was back on the road. I was home in about 5 minutes after that. I was so excited to eat my 4:30 a.m. dinner. I picked up the spare from my parents' hiding spot, unlocked the door, and then quickly hid it back in its hiding spot. I locked the door once I entered, as I always do. I went straight to the kitchen to eat. I made sure to be quiet when I got home late so as not to wake up my parents. We only have 2 cars in the family, so I share my mom's car. I didn't need a car in Boston anyway, but since I moved back, I'd just been using the hidden spare key they would hide in the front to let myself in. I was at the table eating. I heard the front door being unlocked and then opening and closing. I stopped chewing and froze to listen. With a mouth full of food, I said, "Mom? Dad?" No answer. I didn't hear any footsteps or anything. I hurried out of the kitchen to take a peek in the foyer. No one was there. I felt like my heart was in my throat. I ran up the stairs to my parents' room and barged in. I was horrified to see both my parents in bed. They were both awoken to my very forceful opening of the door. I said very quietly, but in clear panic, that someone just came inside the house. My dad jumped out of bed and hurried downstairs. I cautiously followed behind him. He turned on all the lights of every room we passed. Then he went out front to check for the spare key, and it was missing. My mom and I were absolutely horrified, yet my mom still found the time to lecture me for not checking my surroundings before re-hiding the key. My dad began searching every room in the house, and we followed. When he was done checking my older brother's room, he left to continue searching and left the lights on in there. I stayed behind in this room and decided to check a couple of the spots I felt my dad had missed. Internally, I didn't expect to find anyone. I checked under the bed and then checked the closets. Nothing. So I went downstairs to the main floor. It seemed my dad was already checking in the basement. I was honestly horrified to go into the basement right now, even with my dad down there. So I stayed on the middle floor with my mom. But curiosity still got me, and I went to the dining room, which is adjacent to the foyer by the front door. I got down on my knees and looked under the table. And there he was. It truly did not feel real. There was that man from the gas station hiding under the dining room table. I recognized him instantly. I screamed as loud as I could, and in response, my mom started to scream too. My 65-year-old dad came up the stairs as fast as he could, ready to fight this intruder. The man came out from under the table and began fending off my dad, who is at least 20 years his senior. As my mom and I saw him overpowering my dad, we began doing whatever we could as well, hitting and punching the man as my dad still held on to him. It was when all three of us were attacking him that he finally decided to retreat and fled through the front door. This was when we called the cops, and thank God for their quick response time. However, that man still had the key to the front door. That night, the police left a police car parked in our driveway to deter that man from coming back. My dad wedged a chair in front of the front door as well and slept in the living room. The next day, he switched out the lock to the front door, and with that, my parents' days of hiding a key outside were over. I do feel guilty for bringing that dangerous man to my parents' house, and it was definitely on me for being careless. But honestly, I think that man followed me with his headlights off because I didn't see any cars behind me the entire ride home. I'm happy for my and my family's safety though. However, this just made me want to move out of here even more. I like driving at night because there's nothing more that I hate than driving in traffic. I'm from New York, Long Island specifically, and the traffic here is truly unbearable. My brother lives in Florida, and I like to visit him pretty often. It's a long drive though. Depending on when you leave, it could be upwards of 18 hours. I like to leave New York very early in the morning, like 2 a.m., so that I can be out of all the high traffic areas before any cars are on the road. It was a Thursday morning at 2:00 a.m. when I was leaving home to get on the road. I stopped for my morning coffee at Dunkin' Donuts, knowing I had a long, grueling drive ahead of me. The reason I was driving and not flying was that I was going to be down there for a whole month, and I didn't want to rely on my brother to take me everywhere I needed to go. By the time I was off of Long Island, it was after 3:00 a.m. It was smooth sailing from Jersey. The drive from New York to Florida is very easy. Once you're out of New York, you take the I-95 all the way down. At about 4:00 a.m., the hunger was starting to set in, so I pulled off the I-95 at the first sight of a food sign. I saw Wendy's on the sign and figured I'd get breakfast from there. I had skipped breakfast at the house, because waking up so early, I feel like your brain doesn't realize how hungry you are for a few hours. At least, that's me personally. I followed the signs to the Wendy's. I was in some random spot in Jersey. There were no street lights here. I felt like I was in the middle of nowhere. Just about the only light was from my headlights. And I got to the Wendy's parking lot. Some of the lights were on, and I saw a car in the parking lot. I pulled into the drive-thru. The menu in the drive-thru was lit up, so I thought it was open. I sat there for over a minute, looking at the intercom, waiting for someone to greet me, but they didn't. I even said, "Excuse me," to no avail. I pulled out my phone and looked up this Wendy's, and wouldn't you know it, it didn't open until 6:00 a.m. Suddenly, 3 knocks at my window almost sent me out of my seat. I turned to my right, and there was a man outside my window, smiling. He motioned for me to lower the window. I didn't feel comfortable doing that, so I just cracked it open, just enough to hear him. He said the place wasn't open, and I said, "Yeah, I actually just found that out." He then told me he was stranded and pointed to the one other car in the parking lot, saying his battery had died. He practically begged me to come help him jump-start his car. I told him I didn't have jumper cables, and he said not to worry. He had them in his trunk. I took one more look at his car, parked in the corner spot by the woods, and said okay. I believe in karma, and I knew I'd have bad karma if I left this man stranded in a situation I could have easily helped him out in. He backed away from my car so I could pull my car next to his. Since he was parked head in, I did the same to align our hoods as closely as possible. I got out of my car after popping my hood. He went to pop his hood and grabbed his jumper cables. After we connected the cables to the respective terminals, I started my car again. We gave it a minute before I told him he should try starting his car. He took his sweet time walking inside, but when he tried starting it, the car didn't start. We gave it another couple of minutes, and he tried again, still nothing. This was weird, considering he had just been driving the car, so his battery shouldn't need that long to get enough of a charge to start again. The guy then asked me to hang on as he walked away and got on his phone. He started speaking in Spanish in a low volume. I can't really understand Spanish, so I didn't even bother trying to hear what he was saying. He came back to me after his call and said his friend suggested giving it a few more minutes and trying one more time. I said okay. I was trying to do the right thing, but I was also hoping this wasn't going to eat up much more of my time. The last thing I was expecting was the aggressive sound of 2 pickup trucks flooring it into the parking lot, one from either side of the building. I instantly put it together. I said, "Oh," under my breath as I removed the jumper cables from my battery and shut the hood in a hurry. But it was too late. The 2 trucks pulled up behind my car, trapping me in. I had to think on my feet. I looked at the man who was still smiling at me, but now the smile looked and felt much more nefarious and evil. The look he gave me was so unsettling, and it's engraved into my memory. I locked my car with my key fob and darted into the woods. I ran in the dark, cutting up my shins on God knows what. I tripped over something on the ground, and at that point, I took that as a sign to lay down and make myself as tiny as possible. I heard a few men yelling in Spanish somewhere in the woods. I was so scared for my life as the voices got closer. I don't think it gets any more tense than what I was experiencing in that moment. I didn't know how many there were. I didn't know if they were armed. But I heard at least 3 voices. Then the voices started fading away back into the distance. I felt a sense of relief until the sound of my car alarm going off in the distance. All of my stuff was packed in the back of my car, hundreds of dollars worth of clothes, shoes, watches, bracelets. Started making my way back to the parking lot, crouching down. By the time I got close enough to look into the lot, I could see it was just my car there. All 3 other vehicles were gone. I ran out to my car, and it was anyone's worst nightmare. My rear window was shattered, and all of my stuff was gone. Basically, 80% of my entire wardrobe had just been stolen, my suitcase in the trunk, and all the bags in the back seats. Everything. I actually started to shed tears out of pure stress. I called the police and explained everything. The officers on the scene told me they would have to get the CCTV footage from the Wendy's when they opened. After taking all of my information, I was told I didn't need to stay in town and they would be in touch. I was about 2 hours from home. I turned around and drove home. It was the most stressful, depressing, and defeated drive of my life. To make matters worse, I was later contacted by the police department in Jersey. They told me the vehicle in the Wendy's lot had a fake license plate and the 2 pickup trucks didn't have plates. The officer said they were still going to do what they could, but I knew that was just him trying to give me a sense of hope. My stuff was never found. Those bastards got away with it. Like I said, I believe in karma, and I hope those pieces of filth got what was coming to them. We've all taken a long car trip, haven't we? We've all passed that rest area sign multiple times, wondering if we could make it another 20 minutes or not before having to take a pee break or stretch. Sometimes you're lucky and get one of those huge rest areas with big buildings, food, and everything. But most other times, depending on where you are, you'll be lucky to get a little one with a tiny building just for restrooms and nothing else. I was on a long road trip, a 15-hour road trip actually, and a big chunk of that drive was overnight. I won't say from where to where because I don't really think that matters much. But I will say that I was in some bum area on the east coast of the US. It was late at night, and I was powering through the drive. Not many cars were on the road at this hour. In fact, it was a pretty rare sight to see another car on the road this late. I was reaching that uncomfortable point in the ride where I had to use the bathroom, and I was just getting overall antsy in my seat from sitting for so long. I started keeping an eye out for a rest area sign, and when I saw that familiar blue sign, it felt like a saving grace. A few miles later, I veered off into the rest area. It was a small one, but there was a restroom building, and that's all I needed. There were no trucks parked here. I'm pretty sure they could only stay overnight at designated truck rest areas. But there was another car in the parking lot. I considered the possibility that whoever it was might be asleep in their car. As I got out from my car, I stretched a bit. On my way to the bathroom, I looked at the other car in the lot, but the windows appeared to be tinted, so I couldn't see if someone was inside or not. Not that it was a big deal in the moment, I was just curious. I got inside the bathroom and was faced with a strange sight. There was a man standing in the corner of the bathroom, his head looking down and his back toward me. At first, I thought he was using the urinal, but I quickly realized he wasn't even facing the closest urinal. He was literally just facing the corner of the wall. I paused, Unsure whether to say something or not, I almost said, "Are you all right?" But the scene was just too weird. I had to walk closer to him to get to the stall. Honestly, I was almost scared to get near him. I just tried to mind my business and kept a normal pace. I walked into the stall and closed the door. Honestly though, I couldn't go to the bathroom with someone else in the room. I'm one of those people. It was just too dead silent in there. It was weird. I stood in the stall for like a minute, trying to at least pee, but I couldn't for some reason. I flushed the toilet anyway and left the stall. Now the man had turned around. He was still standing in the same spot, but now he was facing me. I could see his face, and he was looking at me. I'm not one to ever judge someone's appearance, but this man was the scariest looking person I'd ever seen. There was something so unsettling about his face, specifically his eye region. The expression he had was a blank stare. I hadn't had a social interaction in over 10 hours, and this caught me way off guard. Instead of saying anything, I quickly turned and headed out of the bathroom. I got to my car and wasted no time turning it on and backing up. As I looked in the rearview mirror, I saw that man walking in the direction of my car. I drove fast to get him out of my sight. I was relieved to get back on the highway. However, that was the only relief I got. I still had to use the bathroom. I was sure it would only be another 20 minutes or so till the next one. I could hold it. I was right. It was about 20 minutes before I got to the next rest area. It was another nearly identical one as the other. Like I said earlier, most are pretty similar. No cars were in this one, thank God. I pulled into a spot right in front of the bathroom and hurried to the stall. Let's just say I felt a lot better very quickly. As I was finishing up in the stall, I heard footsteps enter the room. I thought they'd stop at one of the urinals, but the footsteps came straight to the stall and stopped. I saw someone's shoes through the bottom crack of the door. They were literally standing on the other side of the stall. My first thought was that it was that guy from the other bathroom. He followed me. Social anxiety was handicapping me from saying anything initially until I finally mustered up the courage to say, "Someone's in here." Our response to this though, now I knew I was in trouble. The only thing I could do was dial 911 and put it on speaker so that the man could hear the operator say, 911, "What's your emergency?" Said loud and clear, "I'm being followed by a dangerous man. I feel threatened." As the operator asked my location and details, I answered everything in a loud voice, in a tone suggesting that I was implying a "you" to the man. Thank God this worked, as the person turned and walked out of the bathroom. I told this to the operator, but said I still would feel safer waiting in there until police came. And that's what I did. A knock at the bathroom door from a police officer was my cue to safely come out. I described the man and the vehicle I saw at the other rest area, the creepy encounter, and then the second creepy encounter at this one. We checked my car as well to make sure it wasn't messed with at all. After determining that he was gone, the officer and I left the rest area at the same time, and eventually he turned off the highway. The rest of my road trip went normal, but damn, was this a terrifying night. I've never been followed before. I know with almost 100% certainty that the person outside of the stall was the same creep that was in the first bathroom. It just feels extra weird because I'm a male. These things, I feel like, usually seem to happen to women, but I guess it can really happen to anyone.